When a new project comes down, you know what you do? You start where you are, and beyond that, you start with what you have. Right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about in this guiding principle.
Yeah, start where you are. I think you were saying right before you started the episode about, throwing the baby out with the bathwater,
that's
right? That's one of those things.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Which, by the way, I don't know if you heard that, 'cause where do some of these phrases come from? Because that's we would say here in the United States, it's kind of an idiomatic expression that we have. And a lot of times it doesn't always translate sometimes to other people, but it just seems like back then, when you were doing wash water and stuff like that, I mean, it just sometimes you would be washing your kids and hey, if you didn't know any better, you'd toss that bucket. So they were saying, hey, always don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Must be some dirty water.
I
right?
guess so, for all that. In our case, the way Chris kind of reinvents this is start where you are. I think don't reinvent the wheel, right? What we mean by that is that anytime that you look at the things that you have in play as your organization, you're going to find that there are a lot of things that can be, and here's two magic words, leveraged, reused. Okay, so let's start off with those two things right away, okay? Do not start from scratch and create something without considering what you already have in your environment, in your how you're operating. This could be not only equipment and assets and people, but also processes, the way that you do things. There's likely to be a great deal in your current set of processes, personnel, equipment that can be, again, leveraged or reused to create something new. So what we want to do is make sure that, number one, we want to assess, first off, where we are. In other words, we need to do something, and write this word down, baseline. So we need to find out a baseline to start from, and sometimes, in fact, I don't know, sometimes, a lot of the times doing consulting, I find that a lot of organizations really don't have a good grasp of where they are right now, right? They kind of know, they assume a lot, but when you ask them, well, can you show me some numbers? Can you show me some KPIs, critical success factors, how well you hit your objectives last year? And they're like, well, we kind of did this. And I mean, hey, we're keeping the lights on, we're keeping people paid. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing. Don't
always a good thing.
Don't take me, don't get it, think that I'm trying to, bash what you're doing, but do you really know exactly where you are? And that's why a lot of times as consultants or even within organizations, when you have someone new come in that's in leadership, they usually come in and go, tell me where we're at. What are we doing right now? Because that will then tell you, number one, are we doing fairly well and we can start from here? Or is it, oh goodness, we're really, really bad off and we're going to have to maybe start from scratch? Because sometimes you do, as we're going to talk about, sometimes you can't reuse anything. Sometimes you do have to start from scratch. But that's not the first thing that you do. The first thing you do is say, where are we at, right? Start where you are. And so we're going to assess the services and methods that we already have in place. We're going to look at them and say, all right, are they hitting their targets, right? Whether you're talking about it as an external service level agreement to your customer, or whether you're talking about an internal, what they used to call operational level agreements, right? Those, I call them internal SLAs that we had with our organizations and our divisions and things like that, where the IT team would say, look, we'll handle all this and do that. Okay, so these are things that we're going to look at. And then decisions on what you're going to do can then be based on actual data, like hard numbers. And you actually know that I've got this many people working in my network operations center, and I actually have this type of equipment, and we've actually hit these type of uptime numbers and availability numbers. You now know that. And now that gives you that first step of going, all right, now that we know where we're at, now we can maybe set a target for where we want to be. And we already know the things that we can reuse and we can leverage. Interesting thing about this, though, Scott, is that with this is this necessary, I don't want to say evil, because I don't want to say I'm anti-data and measurements and things like that. That would be silly. But I mean, sometimes this can be a lot of work and very painful is the area of measurements and metrics.
Absolutely. Trying to just even collect the data, figure out what's important can all be overwhelming to an organization, especially if you don't have enough staff or you don't have enough manpower to go do this stuff. It's just something else to add to your list.
Or if you've never even done it before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I've done that to myself sometimes, and I've walked into companies where they're like, that's a thing? And you're like, yes, it is. It's gonna be painful, but once you get it into this rhythm, then it gets a lot easier. So just FYI. Most of you are probably going, yes, Chris, we know that. But the role of measurement, the problem is that measurement can, though, sometimes be this, I want to say a one-size-fits-all solution that people think, well, we'll just measure things. Once we measure things, we're going to have all that. The problem with measurement is that you need to use this to support the analysis that's made by observation rather than replace it. The problem is that a lot of times, especially with big data and AI, is an over-reliance on analytics can actually introduce bias. I think it was my grandfather that said he worked on the Titan missile project. He was a civil worker, coming out of the World War II as an Army Air Corps logistics guy, and so he got hired on and was working and doing really cool things, and he worked with a lot of engineers and a lot of these guys that created the missile programs and eventually turned into our NASA and space. And one of the things that he always said was that the problem is that who do you believe? Your lying eyes or the numbers in front of you. And he says that he got that from an engineer. He says sometimes you can measure something, but then when you watch it and go, yeah, that didn't really match up. Well, that's because measurements and metrics should really come and support what you did, or at least be a starting point, and then you double check against what it is that you're measuring. I'll give you more of a real-world example. My dad is a retired chief petty officer in the Navy, and at one point, as he got older, he decided that it was wise to, in the middle of summer in Arizona, to mow the lawn. And
so hot,
at
isn't it?
70, yeah, and not only that, he lives on the side of a hill, so he's going up and down. Well, he's 70 plus years old, and he decides to call, we call Fleet Admiral Mom, and says, I don't feel too good. My arm feels kind of funny. I think I ate something wrong. And she's like, you silly person. You're probably having a heart attack. Call the ambulance. And so the next call she made was to me, and I was actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico, teaching a ITIL class. And she says, I need you home as soon as possible. Your dad just had a heart attack. You're like, oh goodness. So I get up there and I drive. Thankfully, on the drive from Phoenix to Prescott, which is where I live, she called and she goes, he went into surgery, he came out, he's in recovery, the doctor says it looks good. I'm like, okay, feel a little bit better about that. So I go and I get off of the elevator at the hospital, and I hear, Scott, down the hall, the golden dulcet tones of my dad. I don't want water, I want coffee. And I go, okay. He's back, right? He's arguing with the nurse about coffee. So I walk into the room, and yeah, they're arguing about that. And I feel, okay, good, everything's good. Until, Scott, I look over at the EKG monitor. It's flatlining.
Not good.
Yeah, not good, right?
Good.
Yeah, it's like normally there should be some bouncy and beeping and all that kind of thing. Nah, none of that. So I tapped the nurse on the shoulder, and I said, excuse me. I go, is that supposed to be happening? And she looks and she goes, I'm really sorry. She goes, he had to get up and use the bathroom, so I unhooked him. I just haven't plugged him back in yet. So here's the deal. The measurements said that my dad was pushing up daisies. Direct observation told me otherwise, didn't it? Yeah, he's grumpy, he wants his coffee, he's back into the normal routine. Now, I'm using more of a personal example to kind of show you that that can happen even in tech, where I've actually had somebody go, hey, our bandwidth utilization is great. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, I was running Wireshark. And, look at these numbers. They're great. And I go, you didn't turn it on. And he goes, what do you mean? Because he had just bought the software. I go, you do know that by default, it doesn't measure anything. You have to tell it what to measure. And he goes, oh, okay. And so he started clicking on things like voice traffic, data traffic, and all of a sudden, and I go, now take a look at the results.
Not so good.
Because here's what all of our friends and family in our environment were saying. I'm on a video call, and it's doing this, and it was just horrible. We have bad bandwidth, and the network guy was like, no, look at this. It's practically nothing's happening. Again, measurement said one thing, direct observation said a different thing. So you want to make sure, as a friend of mine says, yeah, but Chris, you need to kind of meet halfway in the middle. Agreed. Okay, that's real world. What you need to know for the exam, though, is that, remember, measurement and metrics, right, should support direct observation, not replace it. And then also look for those magic words, reuse and leverage, okay? So to apply, start where you are. Look at what exists as objectively as possible. Now that's a loaded word, objectively, right? So one of the things you might want to do is instead of you, use your customer, ask them, or look at the desired outcome. What is it that the customer has asked us to do? Are we achieving it? If we're not, then that means our current status or current state is not adequate. We need to at least improve. Now again, do we then just start over from scratch? No, but maybe we can improve what we're currently doing and that'll be better, right? We're still reusing, we're still leveraging things that we already have. Next, when examples of successful practices or services are found in the actual environment, we probably either want to duplicate them or probably modify them a little bit, because you can't always, remember, take something over here and then just plug it in over here and it's going to give you the exact same result, right? You might need to manipulate it a little bit. So that's another thing. Then apply risk management skills. Just understand, there is a risk remaining at your current level, but there's also a risk if you try to jump to the next level. That's why risk management is always something that you want to utilize. And whether that is a cursory, risk analysis that you do, or whether you actually have a risk management team that's all they do, hey, depends on the size of your organization and who you have. As we like to say, your mileage may vary depending on your organization. And then again, and then just kind of realize that sometimes there's just nothing you can reuse and you do need to start over from scratch.
Yeah, sometimes you do have to start over, but in this case, we've gone through the start, and the next video that we're going to talk about, we're going to make some real progress. So we'll see you over there.